Jake here for American Trucks, and today we've got the MotoFab 3-inch front, 2-inch rear leveling kit with upper control arms, fitting 2019 and newer Silverado 1500s. Just a quick note before we get into the nitty-gritty here, this kit is not going to work on Trail Boss models or Silverados that come with the factory adjustable suspension. Now this kit from MotoFab is excellent for the Silverado owner who is looking for a simple way to add some additional height to their truck, whether it's for bigger wheels and tires, for off-roading pursuits, or to level out the stance while they're at it. You get some good quality components here with a good sized increase in stance, all for a pretty reasonable price. Now again, this is going to give you 3 inches of lift up front and 2 inches of lift in the back, giving your truck a higher stance that is pretty much even back to front, removing that rake that these Silverados come with from the factory. Now having that extra height is going to give you the ability to fit 33-inch tires without issue, as you can see on our truck here. You may be able to squeeze some 35s on there as well, but just be aware that it's probably going to result in some rubbing or the need to do some trimming. So for that reason, I would recommend sticking with 33s if you're going with this kit. Now to grant you that extra height, you get a set of spacers and control arms up front. Now the spacers themselves measure only about 2 inches in physical height, but it's important to remember that this is not a 1-to-1 ratio. So you're still gonna get that 3 inches of lift up front, despite these only measuring 2 inches. And since these just go on the top of your struts, there's no need to mess around with springs or spring compressors either. Now to help accommodate for that extra height, you also get a set of new upper control arms. And you probably already caught that these are angled to correct the ball joint angle and give you a full range of motion once they're installed. Of course, they also feature brand new ball joints and new bushings to give you a bit of a refresh as well. And those ball joints come pre-greased, but they also have a little Zerk fitting at the top too, should you need to grease them somewhere down the road. Now having these arms included is great too, because it means that your truck is gonna be able to be aligned properly. Everything is gonna move and flex properly too, so you'll maintain your stock ride quality and drivability. Now out back you get a more standard style block lift with these fabricated blocks. Now these are gonna measure about 3 inches in physical height. However, it is important to keep in mind that you are replacing 1-inch blocks that come on your truck. So thus, these are gonna add up to a total of 2 inches in lift for the back. And there's new U-bolts included in the kit to accommodate for that additional height as well. Now that 2 inches of lift in the back will pair with a 3-inch lift up front to level out your truck, giving you a nice even stance front to back. Now construction here is all pretty solid. The front spacers are made from CNC machined billet aluminum and they're topped with this nice textured black powder coat. Similar story with the upper control arms here. These are made from 1¼ inch billet aluminum tubing and they feature that same black powder coat. Now all that aluminum means that these are gonna be strong and they're not gonna deform under stress, and they're also gonna stand up to the elements because they've got that coating on there. Worth mentioning again that you do get new ball joints and bushings already pressed into these control arms as well. Now the rear spacers, like I mentioned a few moments ago, are fabricated and they're meant to outlast even the toughest of other materials. These are also topped off in a matching black powder coat, so they're gonna be able to handle just about anything that you can throw at them. Pricing for this kit comes in at about $550, putting it about in the middle of the category for lift level kits. Now again, you're not getting a 6-inch lift or brand new shocks here, but this is more than just a standard block or spacer style lift, because you are getting those new upper control arms. So for what you're getting, I think this is pretty appropriately priced and a good value. Installation here gets a 2 out of 3 on our difficulty meter, and you should be able to get this done in about 2 hours. Now, since you aren't replacing shocks or swapping springs, it is a pretty straightforward operation, just requires some disassembly to gain access to the stuff that you need. This is certainly a job that you can tackle at home. Just remember that once you've got it all done, you're gonna need to get your truck aligned to make sure everything is working properly. And now to walk you through the process, let's head over to the install bay.
The tools you'll need for this project are an 18mm ratcheting wrench, a 10mm ratcheting wrench, an 18mm, a 9mm, a 15mm, and a 13/16 or 21mm wrench, a 22mm deep socket, a 21mm, an 18mm, a 17mm, and a 15mm deep sockets, along with a 9mm, a 10mm deep socket, a T40 Torx bit, a 3/16 Allen head wrench, a 21 millimeter socket, a 17 millimeter socket, a short extension, an 8 millimeter Allen head wrench, 1/4 inch, 3/8, 1/2 inch drive ratchets, an impact gun, a power ratchet, a ball peen hammer, 1/2 inch breaker bar, a pry bar, and a manufacturer's supplied measuring device for the control arms. Hi everyone, today we're installing a leveling kit on our Silverado, but first let's watch a short video on how to uninstall the stock spring and strut, and then we'll see you right back here to uninstall the control arm.
All right, first step here, once you get your wheels out of the way and your vehicle supported up in the air, we're gonna start removing our ABS line bracket. There's one here on the knuckle and one on the upper control arm. Grab a 10 millimeter socket and get those off. Now what I like to do is once you pop that off, I like to just put the bolt back on just so we don't lose it. Just a couple of threads, and then do the one at the top. Next up, we're gonna remove our sway bar end link. Now this is a pretty difficult one. You wanna have a couple of specialty tools here. Not necessarily specialty tools, but specific tools. What you wanna use is an 18 millimeter wrench. Put that on the nut here on the back first. Then you're gonna grab a 1/4 inch ratchet and a 9 millimeter deep socket and hold that stud on the back end. And you're gonna ratchet this guy off like this, instead of ratcheting the nut, just because it's a really tight space. So using the 9 millimeter on the stud itself, you can start to loosen it all the way up and remove it. All right, once you have that nut backed all the way off, pull the end link out of the sway bar, and then I'm just gonna put the nut back on the stud. Next, we're gonna tackle the upper control arm to the knuckle here by removing the 18 millimeter nut. I'm gonna use an 18 ratcheting wrench for this. Now, if it gets to the point where the entire stud is spinning, you can put this guy in there, follow it up with the appropriate size Allen key, and hold that stud steady. All right, making life easier here because this is starting to get stuck, we're gonna switch over to a T40 Torx socket, and using my ratchet, we're gonna hold that stud steady and ratchet this guy the rest of the way off. There you go. And what I like to do is just take the nut, put it right back on the stud. Next up, switch over to a 21 deep socket and get the tie rod end off. All right, we may need to grab a hammer to knock this guy loose. Once you have that knocked loose, let's pull that guy out. And just like the other ones, I'm gonna put this nut back on. Next up, switch over to a 15 deep socket. We're gonna get the 2 bolts holding the bottom of the strut to the lower control arm off. All right, next up, grab a 14 millimeter ratcheting wrench. We're gonna remove the top 3 nuts holding on the strut here. That's gonna be the last step before the strut comes out. There are 2 right here in the front you can easily see, and 1 deeper in the back, which is difficult to see, but you're just gonna hit these 2 and then repeat for the 1 in the back. Once you break it loose, you can usually get it off by hand. Okay, repeat that for the 1 in the back. All right, from there, pull this guy down and set it aside.
To remove the upper control arm, we're going to need a 21 millimeter socket and a 21 millimeter wrench, so let's go ahead and get that done. Now we can go ahead and assemble our front spacers using these 3 studs here, inserting them from the back side. And we'll tighten them down using an 8mm Allen wrench. Now we can install the spacer on top of the strut and attach the supplied nylock nuts to the studs. And now you can tighten them down using a 17mm socket. Now because the new spacer on top is going to rotate the strut 180 degrees, we need to re-angle the lower mount on the strut. So we're going to do that by simply putting the bolts in here, inserting it into the vise, and pulling it the other way. Now we can go ahead and reinstall the strut back into the truck. Now we can install our new control arm using the original hardware, keeping in mind, of course, that the control arms are side specific. So make sure that you match it up with the original, and let's go ahead and get this installed. Now you may have to use a pry bar to help spread this apart a little bit to get it lined up for the other side. Now the manufacturer does supply a measuring device so that we can set the proper height for our control arm. To do that, we just insert it on the bump stop, set the control arm down on top of it like so, and then we can go ahead and tighten up our nuts. Using our 21mm socket and our 21mm wrench. Now we can go ahead and reinstall our strut using the original hardware. Now at this point, you may want to use your floor jack to help support that lower control arm. And then you'll also need a pry bar to help pry down the control arm on the coil spring so that we can insert it into the steering knuckle. And we'll secure it with the supplied washer and nylock nut. Now we can go ahead and reinsert our tie rod in and secure it with the original hardware. Now we can go ahead and reinsert our sway bar end link. You may have to use a pry bar to help push it into place and secure it with the original hardware. Now we can go ahead and reattach our ABS and our brake line brackets. And the upper bracket here that goes to the control arm, the manufacturer does supply an Allen screw for that. So we'll go ahead and use that. Tighten it down with a 3/16 Allen head. And then we'll go ahead and reattach the other brackets using the original hardware. Make sure that you tighten everything down to factory recommended specifications, and then repeat the process on the other side. And also, one other note, when you're all finished, make sure you take your truck in, get in alignment so that everything rides smooth. Now you can do this job on the ground using some jack stands and a floor jack, but we've obviously got ours on a lift, so we're going to use a pole jack to support the differential when we disconnect everything else. We're going to be reusing our stock shock, so we're just going to disconnect it from the lower end here and then remove our U-bolts using a 21mm socket and a 21mm wrench. Now, depending upon the condition of your nuts and your bolts, you may have to break out the breaker bar to get this loose. And a little bit of spray lube won't hurt either. And you can repeat those steps for the other side. Now we can go ahead and install our rear leveling blocks, paying special attention to the fact that one side is taller than the other. You want to make sure that the shorter side is towards the front of the truck so that everything aligns properly. Now we can install our new supplied U-bolts along with our bottom clamp, making sure, of course, that the U-bolts fit in the saddles at the top of the leaf springs. Now you can see that we're doing this on a lift using a pole jack, but you can easily do this on the ground using a set of jack stands and a floor jack. So now that we've got our clamp attached to the bottom of the differential, we can go ahead and raise that up to seat this block properly. Now we can go ahead and attach the rest of the supplied hardware. And tighten them all down using our 22mm socket. Now we'll go ahead and finish raising our differential using our pole jack so that we can reinsert our original hardware for our lower shock mount. And we'll tighten that down with our 21mm socket and our 21mm wrench. Now you can repeat this process on the other side, and remember to torque everything down to factory recommended specifications. And that wraps up our review and install of the Motofab 3-inch front, 2-inch rear leveling kit with upper control arms for the 19 to 22 Silverado 1500, excluding Trail Boss. Thanks for watching, and remember, For all things Silverado, keep it right here at AmericanTrucks.com.